call the September meeting of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission to order. Good afternoon, everybody. Looks like we have definitely have a quorum. Reverend Taylor had requested an excused absence for this week, for this month's meeting. So do we have a motion to excuse him?
So moved.
Okay, who was that?
David.
David, thank you. And a second?
Second, Ken.
Thank you, Ken. All in favor?
Aye.
And let's see, do I have camera for everybody? Apologize, I'm a little rusty on all the different screens I've got to watch here, but I'm guessing that's unanimous. Can anybody else see? We don't have cameras on for everybody, I guess, or I'm not seeing it. Let's see. Apologize.
Looks unanimous, yes.
Okay. Well, as we go along, I'm going to try to make sure I can see everybody on screen, but I won't hold us up more. Here we go. Layout. That's what I want. Ah, much better. Okay. Next up on the agenda, we have the minutes from the July meeting. There was not an August meeting. It was canceled for a summer break. I trust everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from the July meeting. Is there any discussion, a need for corrections, or anything like that? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Ken.
Second that.
Thanks, Jonathan. All in favor? Okay. Looks like that's unanimous as well. And we will move on now, a little ahead of schedule, to our public comment period. Wayne, do we have anybody signed up for comment at this point?
I have not received any emails. I don't see anybody in the chat. If there is someone who would like to speak, if you could send me a chat request very briefly, either with your issue or to request to speak. Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anything come in. If we get a late one, I'll give you a notification, but I'm not seeing anything at this point.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll encourage anyone who's in attendance, if they're having some technical difficulties right now, we will bear with you and make time. We're a little ahead of schedule already, so Wayne, just let me know if you get any comments along the way, and we'll can find an appropriate place to work that back in.
Will do.
Right. Cruising right along. It's time for our put a commissioner in a corner with Jonathan Page.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Evan. So my name is Jonathan Page. I think I'm in my 4th year now as a member of Raleigh's SMAC, and I've learned a ton in that process. I got more familiar with Raleigh Stormwater while I was working at NC State in the bio and ag engineering department there, and had an opportunity to actually work on a few sort of innovative projects with the city, and in particular Kevin Boyer and some of his staff, and that kind of got me a little bit more interested in what the city was doing, and ended up having an opportunity to participate. And I think when I got started, Matt Starr was the chair, and I believe Blair Hinkle was in Wayne's current role. So there's been a few things that have changed since I first got started participating here. But I have since left NC State. I've got my own small engineering firm now, which is River Mechanics PLLC. And so we really kind of focus more on streams, rivers, floodplains, flood studies. We do a little bit of wetland work as well. It still overlaps quite a bit with some of the source causes being stormwater, and those inputs are really important to a lot of what we do now. But I've enjoyed participating here. It's like I said, I've learned a ton about sort of how municipal programs operate. I hope that over the last years, some of the comments that I've been able to sort of put forth have been beneficial. But more than anything, I think I've gained a lot more in my time participating here than perhaps what I've contributed. So, Evan, is there anything more specifically that you'd like for me to cover outside of that?
I think that's pretty good. I disagree that you've taken away more than you've given. Certainly your expertise has been very critical on a number of discussions, so appreciate that. And nice to have you here on the commission.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess, the general idea with this is that since we're not able to meet in person and we haven't been able to have sort of some of the traditional gatherings after a meeting once a year, get to know each other a little bit, little by little through this process, and also just share with the public who we are and how we hope to represent our neighbors. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Evan. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Next item on our agenda is the Planning Commission SMAC liaison comments. Mr. Stansel, do you have anything for the good of the group this month?
Well, I haven't been pulled into any rezoning cases lately that had significant stormwater issues. I remain in active communication with city staff and the Planning Commission, and I hope at some point that we can advance GSI and improve our stormwater management practices. And I encourage anybody, whether they're a member of the public or SMAC, to contact me directly with anything they'd like me to tune into, or any matters of concern. I would love to hear about it.
Okay. Wayne, are you aware of any issues where we need to be on the lookout for a liaison with the Planning Commission? Any additional UDO changes or things like that they're working on that we should be paying attention to?
I'm not aware at this time, and Mr. Chair and Mr. Stansel and I did speak earlier today just to coordinate, and we both agreed there's nothing that seems to be critical right now in terms of rezoning cases that have had significant stormwater issues coming up. Probably the next significant text changes that will be forthcoming, and they are still a little bit down the road. One is the Stormwater Design Manual, which you've heard an update from Ben Brown. That will be processed as a text change because it is part of the Unified Development Ordinance technically. That will likely be in the spring when that really starts moving forward. We are still in the second round of stakeholder input. And another one is we are currently working with the City Attorney's Office to update our ordinance to be consistent with the new model ordinance that the state has put forth, and the EMC, Environmental Management Commission, has approved, related to our stormwater controls, our post-construction stormwater controls, and nutrient compliance. So there's some new guidance that's out in terms of the model ordinance. We'll be updating our ordinance to reflect that. That will likely come very soon in the near future, within the next couple of months.
Okay. Well, Joey, sounds like you're going to have some work ahead of you there, and
Look forward to it.
Yeah, glad to have somebody in the position, and we all look forward to that. Anybody else have any other questions or comments on Planning Commission items, text change, planning, that kind of thing? Okay. Wayne, I'll let you take it away from here for a little bit. Go through your staff updates and other topics.
Great, glad to, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I'd like to start off with some updates on our staffing. We've had some new additions to our staff, as well as one promotion I'd like to announce. First, Sally Hoyt has joined our team as the GSI advocate. That's a position that you recall was a very important new position we created in our plan review group as part of our implementation for our GSI plan that SMAC was very instrumental in developing. And so Sally comes to us from UNC Chapel Hill, where she has brought a lot of GSI experience. She was the stormwater utility manager there, and has also done a lot of design and watershed planning in the consulting world, as well as with the nonprofit Center for Watershed Protection. Another addition, Danny Hinnant is an engineering specialist with the stormwater control measures inspection group. He's been with the city of Raleigh, was with Raleigh Water for 20 years, and brings extensive experience in field utility technician, ordinance regulations, verifying work orders, and so forth. So we're very excited to have Danny join our team in a very important compliance role for stormwater control measures. And then Jaleesa White has joined our team. She has also been with the city previously, and was with Development Services as a permit technician. Jaleesa is joining our team in the Drainage Assistance Investigation Group. And she's going to bring a lot of permitting experience and customer relationship experience to her role in stormwater. So we're very excited to have Jaleesa on our team as well. And then lastly, a name that's familiar to you, Justin Harcum, has been promoted to a senior engineer in the water quality section. This is actually a newly created role within the division. We reclassified an existing position to place more emphasis and more responsibility for NPDES MS4 compliance in making a person primarily responsible for monitoring and implementing new measures to make sure we're staying in compliance. Industrial inspections, pollution prevention, good housekeeping, illicit connection detection, elimination program. So Justin's in that role now, and will be backfilling his new role. Now, he is still oversees the Rainwater Rewards program. We'll still roll up to Justin, so he'll stay involved in that program. I know that's where you all have seen him most recently. So those there are some others pending that I will announce next month, but we have some other changes coming as well.
It's all very good news. I'd like to extend a welcome to Sally. I don't see her on the attendee list, but I'm very happy to hear about her joining the team and filling that important role. And Danny, Jaleesa, and Justin, congratulations.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue on. The first high priority topic we have is for those of you who attended the last meeting, which was in July. Now we took August off. There was a presentation on the Biophilic Cities program by Scott Payne, Assistant Director in Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources. Parks and Rec, they are bringing a request to move forward with an application to City Council, and have requested, if the Commission would so choose, a letter of endorsement for that program. And so in the agenda and background materials package, there was a draft of that letter of endorsement. And should the Commission choose to do so, I'd like to bring forth the request from the Parks and Recreation Department, as well as the Parks Recreation Advisory Board, who is the primary leadership organization here for a letter of endorsement.
Yeah.
And
So-
Mr. Chair, if you and the commission believe that's worth taking forward, I think it would be helpful to have a vote, a motion and a vote if you would like to move forward with that endorsement.
Yeah, looks like this was presented, this item was presented in July, and the commission at that time, I think, indicated interest in moving forward.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Is there anybody on the commission who would like to comment at this time? Or needs any more background information? So sounds like a motion would be appropriate now to support application to the Biophilic Cities program. Does anyone want to make that motion?
I'll move to support it. It sounds like an exciting thing for the city. We definitely need to push forward.
Thank you, David.
I'll be a second on that, Evan.
All right, Jonathan. So, and I've reviewed the letter and the information from the July meeting. I'd concur that this would be an important program for the city to apply to and provide some great incentives and linkages between open space and natural conservation and stormwater management. So we have a motion and a second to provide a letter of support for the application to the Biophilic Cities program. All in favor? Okay, looks like that passes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Mr. Chair, if appropriate, if you have any edits to the letter, please let me know. Otherwise, if I can send you a copy, it'd be helpful to get a signature fairly quickly on that letter, as they are planning to take it to City Council next week.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be happy to sign it as it was included here in the agenda packet. And I can do that. I can come by and give you a hard copy, or I can put an electronic signature on a PDF if you prefer.
I think electronic would be fine. I'll send you an email right after the meeting.
Great.
Thank you, everyone. The next item we have is update on the equity inclusion framework. And I believe Barbara Maranta is on and is going to give you a little update on that and a preview of coming attractions. Barbara?
Oh, thank you, Wayne. Good afternoon, everyone, and good to see you all virtually. As you know, the Stormwater Division has been exploring ways to incorporate equity into a number of program areas. For example, we're reviewing our integrated prioritization model with an equity lens. Also, later in this meeting, Chaz Webb will be talking about equity considerations in the stream stabilization program. And as part of the Hair Snipe watershed study, which we kicked off in May, we've developed a draft equity framework with help from our consultant. And the goal is to use this framework on the Hair Snipe study and future watershed studies. And with this framework, we want to incorporate equity into all phases of the planning effort, such as equitable engagement and project prioritization. So to give you all a little bit of background, we had a number of workshops from May to July to develop this framework. We met with the Office of Equity and Inclusion so that we are aligned with city goals. We met with other city departments to learn more about their initiatives and see where we may be in alignment. We had a workshop with stormwater staff to hear about stormwater specific goals. Our consultant presented best practices from other municipalities. And finally, we had a collaborative workshop with staff from across stormwater to collaboratively develop this framework. And we've got the draft now. It's being reviewed by the Office of Equity and Inclusion. And once we've got their comments, we envision sending this to the commission for your review and feedback this fall. And we're thinking we'll send you the draft report, have a couple of meetings or presentations on the content, and would really like to incorporate your feedback into this framework. So we're excited about the effort, and we look forward to discussing it further with you this fall. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Barbara.
Thanks.
Anyone have questions on that topic at this point before we move on? Okay, great, thank you. Next item we had is an update related to Raleigh Rainwater rewards. Those of you at the July meeting may recall there was a discussion of the application to the rewards program on Woodbourne Road. And there were some concerns and questions related to the cost breakdown and the cost estimate specifically for the tank that was being used as part of the cistern project. And we said we would bring that back to you with some additional cost breakdown. However, I did want to pass along that the applicant has since withdrawn this application. So just so you're aware, we will not be bringing that additional information back to the commission. And then related to that, the Rainwater Rewards Program, a proposal from staff for your consideration, really from an efficiency of meeting standpoint, we would suggest that Rainwater Rewards applications be put on the agenda on a quarterly basis and brought to the commission and reviewed in groups. Rather than coming, I think we've been coming every other month. So instead of every other month, it would be every third month. And it's really just from an efficiency standpoint. And then we would coincide those. We were already providing quarterly program update reports to the commission. So the application reviews under this proposal would coincide with the quarterly report updates. And Justin Harcum is on the meeting today, can help with any questions about either the first item that was withdrawn or the proposal to consider applications quarterly. Any questions about that, input or comments regarding a quarterly review process?
I mean, that sounds fine to me, Wayne and Justin. I don't see any downside to that.
Is there any impacts to the timing of construction of these projects?
Yeah, so good. As you know, this is a reimbursement program, and should the applicant choose, they can move forward with construction. So it would be their option, although you know, that would be at their risk if their application was not approved by the commission. Justin, would you weigh in on that, please? If you know, does that make sense to you as well?
Absolutely, it's a good question, Evan. The one thing we do find with these larger projects and with packaging them and prepping them for commission review, it does take more time. So giving them that target date, I guess as long as we can stick to the quarterly presentations, which we're usually always on the agenda anyways for that R3 update, then that allows me to consolidate them and point that if you don't make this date, it also allows me a little bit of leverage to say, hey, let's get this application complete. There is a lot of back and forth with each application, as y'all are well aware from what y'all have seen in the past. And so this gives everyone big target dates, and it puts the onus a little bit more on the applicant, which I feel like it is a fair approach from my experience so far. But more than happy to hear the commission's feedback on it or any other suggestions.
Thanks. And I guess if the commission has questions, wants clarification on a particular application, we could always take that up at the next monthly meeting in order to keep things moving along, provided the applicant provides the clarification we're looking for in time.
Yes, I think that'd be a reasonable approach. I don't know that we would necessarily have to wait a whole quarter then if it was just a question about a clarification, that we got that information quickly back.
I would agree that's kind of critical to not hold somebody up for another 3 months if they've already waited 3 months potentially.
Mhm.
Yeah, sounds like a good approach and efficient way to do things. So.
Great. I don't think that requires any type of a vote. It's more a procedural issue. So we'll proceed in taking that approach in the future.
Thanks.
Thanks, Justin, for your input. Yeah. And then the last item, notices prior to construction, no additional items to report this month. And that's all I have under that agenda topic.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments from commission members at this point? Okay. So next up, we been eagerly awaiting rollout of the stream stabilization program, and we have, I guess it looks like we're headed up for another good milestone here with the presentation coming up next. Mr. Webb, you want to take it away?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Kane. Appreciate it. And I'm going to share my screen. Good to see everybody virtually again. Can you guys see the full screen there?
Not
Not yet, Chaz.
Oh.
Okay, that's good.
There you go.
Well, thank you and welcome everybody. This is a follow-up to the stream stabilization program presentation from the last MAC meeting and the meeting before. And you likely recall that I talked about the basics of the program, and now this presentation will look at the policy of the program. We're going to go through a presentation overview. We'll cover some previous presentations, then we'll cover the key policies of the sections. Then we'll look at some example projects. Then we'll talk about equity and open it up to any questions. And by all means, if you have questions throughout the presentation, or if you want, there's something you'd like to discuss, please feel free to stop and be glad to talk it out or answer any questions that you have. So just a brief reminder as to the proposed weights that we have discussed. You can see B high at 22.5%, pollutant reduction at 20%, buffer reduction at 18%, and so on for the list. These were kind of the weights that we've looked towards and are planning on moving forward with. And you may recall from the previous presentation that with those weights, we came up with some example projects. We had project 1, severe erosion, project 2, minor erosion, project 3, pollutant reduction, and the respective scores that we came up with. Again, very preliminary, just looking at this from a bird's eye view. Now let's take a look at the policy, and hopefully you have had a chance to see the draft policy that we're looking to include. So if you did, then all of this will look familiar to you. As we go through this policy, I'd like for you to keep in mind that this is modeled after the existing drainage systems policy. So with that, section 1 is an overview. This policy supports the mission by protecting life, supporting natural resources, complementing sustainable growth. And it does that by supporting the stormwater objective. And within those objectives are creating and repairing buffers, stabilizing eroding stream banks. And these are the things that have been discussed in previous presentations as to how the stream stabilization program supports the overall stormwater mission and objective. So moving on to section 2 of the policy, which is definitions. Within that section of the policy is definition of stream buffer. They get into various stream definitions and various easements, and I'll just go through briefly these easements. A conservation easement is a written agreement between a landowner and the city. A temporary construction easement also allows temporary access for construction work. Excuse me. Rights of entry is an agreement that allows the city to enter a property without trespassing, and a permanent drainage easement is a recorded legal document with the owner being the grantor and the city being the grantee. So section 3 talks about program eligibility. The project must be located in Raleigh corporate limits and be ratepayers. Now, there are situations where a property could have a situation where there is stream erosion, but because there's no impervious, they're not paying a stormwater fee. We have that situation sometimes with HOAs. They own a common lot and there's erosion at a stream or a pond. And even though the homeowners benefit from the lake or pond, they are paying a fee and would be eligible. So those properties that are paying the fee would be eligible. The HOA property itself, typically where you see the lake or pond or stream, may not be eligible. So we do have some situations like that. Also, the project must receive and convey public runoff, and the project must have a defined stream, ephemeral, intermittent, perennial, and the project must have a minimum of 20-foot buffer area. Now, we talked about in the previous presentations about having a 20-foot minimum buffer area. Now, there may be situations where a 20-foot buffer area is feasible, but we've looked at, with those situations, they would rank lower on the prioritization model. You may recall that for buffer restoration, it's pretty significant. It's up there at 18%. So now the question becomes, would we need a minimum buffer area?
So, quick question on that.
Yes, sir.
Does that mean that the 20-foot buffer area must already exist or must be able to be established?
That's a good question. I would say it would have to be established, and that could be very hard in situations where you already have, say, for example, a house that's very close to the buffer, and you're looking to stabilize that buffer, and now you're reducing the slope, say, to a 3-to-1 slope.
Mm-hmm.
So we've looked at the fact that could be hard to achieve, and that may hinder some properties.
Would that type of a situation be likely to fall into the drainage assistance program as threatening a structure or something like that?
Yes, another good point and question as well, that a lot of those properties have gone through the drainage assistance program, but there's some maybe, you look at maybe 22 or 24 or 25 feet right now, that now if you add that new buffer, now you're encroaching on that 20-foot buffer. Now it's down to, say, 17 or 15 feet, and they can't provide that 20 feet.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there may be some properties that would fall into a gap between drainage assistance and stream bank stabilization with that.
Yes, and that's that is something that we're working through about, how do we take those properties that wouldn't necessarily qualify under drainage assistance but could score higher in stream stabilization program, or likewise you could have a vice versa situation as well. They may score higher in drainage assistance as compared to stream stabilization.
Chaz, I had one other question for you on that. Was Was a 30-foot buffer discussed at all? And the reason I ask is I think that'd be more consistent with like new zone 1 sort of buffer protections. And I just wonder if we're spending city dollars on that, but sort of on the impact side, on the development side, you know, they get dinged for impacting inside of 30 feet pretty significantly. Anyway, I just the consistency there I wonder about a little bit, and sort of prioritizing that 30-foot buffer just to be consistent with the current buffer protections for the news.
That is a very good point. But what I'll say to that is that includes new development. You know, this is not new development, and we touch on that a little bit later in this presentation about how this, you know, like the drainage systems program, this is not designed for properties that have a development plan associated with them going through development services. So, you know, I agree there's some merit to making it consistent with a 30-foot buffer, but I can also say that, you know, if we do that, then there are a lot of properties that may not be able to qualify because there's just simply not enough room. And I've got, for example, I think the second project that I'll present in the top 3 that we looked at simply can't provide a 30-foot buffer without tearing down a structure.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think at some point it may be helpful to talk about the buffer just a little bit more, but for now, I think it makes sense to move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chaz, if I could, just for a second, offer a little bit of clarifying sort of point to the must have a minimum 20-foot buffer area. I think it would be better sort of stated more clear that they must have a minimum 20-foot area that can be designated in a permanent conservation easement. Because that buffer technical area, you know, if it's an intermittent or perennial stream, noose buffers are already there, exist, the 30 feet and 20 feet. There may be a house within that existing buffer, but what we're in this program is attempting to do is at least conserve or restore, you know, if there have been impacts to that existing buffer, a minimum of 20 feet in this situation, or more if we'd like to line it up with zone 1 of the new river buffers to be 30 feet. You know, one of the things when we looked at this minimum and the potential to do away with it was the potential of trying to look also at equity, and realizing that not every property may have 20 feet of clear space or 30 feet of clear space or 50 feet of clear space that they could provide a conservation easement on. You know, so that's sort of one of the reasons we went from a 30-foot conservation easement down to maybe a 20, and maybe the consideration that we get rid of it altogether and we can conserve as much as the property owner is willing to let us conserve. But knowing that if they're only allowing conservation of a 10-foot buffer area, or 10 foot from the top of the bank, that project would generally score lower and not be as high a priority as someone who say had 50 or 40 feet that they could offer in a conservation easement. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful, Dale. I think my question was sort of coming from, I feel like when we had a lot of these stream bank stabilization projects coming through as part of the drainage assistance program, for a lot of it, you know, it always came up like, was structure built before or after the news rules? That seemed to be an ongoing or recurring theme. And you know, my thought was, well, you know, if we looked at it historically sort of from a pre and post buffer rules, wouldn't we want to target what, you know, that 30-foot requirement? I understand that in a residential scenario, it's going to be hard to hit 30 feet, right? I mean, everything's pretty tight. The only other question I would ask is, could there be some flexibility based on the size of the stream? Like a 20-foot buffer will provide quite a bit of protection for a stream that's, say, you know, 6 to 8 feet wide versus something for like a Crabtree Creek that's considerably less protection and stabilization value that you might have in that scenario.
Yeah, I think there's some consideration that we could give to go in less, but with that, you may recall from the matrix that we had on the previous presentation that the lower the amount of linear footage that you provided or area that you provided, the less you scored on the prioritization model.
But I think we can look at that. We could look at potential widths per drainage area or per stream flow or some stream width, something that maybe tied the two together. We can think more about that.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you. Good discussion there.
Hey, Chaz, just before we go on, if you back up, was there any discussion around, from the SMAC's point of view, around the customers or the eligibility of they must be ratepayers, in a situation where, as Chaz mentioned, the HOA or common space or maybe even an undeveloped tract of land that did not have impervious area associated with it, was not a ratepayer but did have severe erosion. So, would be some potential benefit to doing a stream stabilization project, although not technically a ratepayer.
This is Mark. I mean, I think that's a good question. Personally, I think there's situations where, the city could meet its goals and benefit from stabilizing a running stream that's on an undeveloped piece of property. It's developed, that's kind of typically a criteria for the drainage assistance policy. For a stream stabilization program, that may be a little bit different. If nothing else, I'd like to have some flexibility in there where the city gets to make that decision whether or not it's beneficial enough to do a project where there is just no improvement. It's really pretty much an environmental benefit, or you always have the risk of you're improving a piece of property for somebody that's going to develop it, but that's where you need to make a judgment call on the cities.
Yeah, I'm looking in the policy right now to see, is there something about developed property? And I know you've talked about it, and I'm not seeing it mentioned specifically. But if that were clear that this does not apply, is it possible to say, the property must be a stormwater rate paying customer if applicable? If there is no impervious surface, then rate paying goes out the window, or?
Yes, later on in the presentation, we talk about how if there's a development plan associated with the property, that they're not eligible.
Okay, I thought I had seen that.
Much like the drainage systems.
But but I do like the if applicable or some language like that does maybe give some flexibility.
Does this is Ken. Does ratepayer fall into the prioritization model at all as a prioritization criterion? Would that be something to think about in terms of priority of being actually, making the program?
It is not included in the existing prioritization. It's one of the sort of the key eligibility criteria, but not overall prioritization. But it could be something, if taken out of sort of the eligibility, could be added into a prioritization of a stabilization project if they do pay the rate.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Okay, continuing on with the program eligibility, you'll be funded based off the prioritization model, and that's the integrated stormwater model that's also used for drainage assistance. The property owners shall grant the required easements, and if they do not, then they can be put on hold. The design must meet city standards. And as we've talked about so far, the program is not intended for new development or redevelopment. So if the property has a development plan tied to it, it would not be considered. Onto the application of the policy, staff will evaluate the request. It'll be based on funds available. Like the drainage assistance, we'd like the projects to come through SMAC for recommendations to council and then for council approval. And there may be some opportunities where the city can enter into agreements with other public agencies, such as NCDOT.
What is, sorry, going back to the question of development of the property, new construction or redevelopment, what's the sort of time horizons that we're dealing with in terms of a development plan? And I guess what I'm kind of thinking is, if a project of this type were conducted on a piece of property, you know, how far out would we be considering reasonable for somebody to come in and say, oh, you know, we didn't know we were going to develop at the time that we applied for the stream bank stabilization?
Well,
not a well-worded question. I'm sorry there, but
no, it's okay. It's a good point, because you could have someone who I think maybe along the lines of where the old cinema used to be off Wade Avenue, and they're redeveloping all of that. They tore down the cinema, and now they're putting up, you know, some mixed use. And you know, you could look at that and say they technically didn't know, but usually if you consider the fact that a lot of these developments have to go through a very long process of, you know, rezoning and you know, what that application means and the process for that, and then they have to go through their preliminary, and then they have to go through their site permitting review. So it's a long process to get a development plan approved from start to finish. Now, you know, what is the timeline? I mean, you could say maybe a year, but again, that's just throwing a number out there. It's you know, we would have a year look back. Generally speaking, I think people know for, you know, a year or so that they're gonna do a development on a property. I don't think they come into a property and just develop it and say, okay, now we're going to move forward. And if they did, then the city has certain processes and certain steps before they can eventually get their CO.
so it sounds like, you know, if it would be, if someone were trying to use stream bank stabilization to their benefit on a development, it's going to be pretty speculative that they get approved, that the city establishes easements and those easements don't interfere with their other plans before they've got those plans set down.
Yes,
Again,
yeah, I could see, you know, a situation where maybe someone does know they have a master plan and they have a long-term plan, and they choose to use a stream stabilization program, and then a couple of years go down the road and they choose to develop it. I'm not saying, I mean, I could see that being a situation as well.
okay. And I don't want to belabor the point over something that might only have a remote chance, but just wanted to look in a little more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I saw a question come up on my chat, but I can't see I saw a notification for a chat, but I can't see my chat screen. Did somebody ask a question in my chat?
Mark Senior asked a question about what does it mean for something to be designed to the city design standards, you know, usually associated with closed conduit, passing a certain level storm. You know, we can work on that language. I think it's more intent that make sure that we follow the city processes, permitting, state, federal, and we're doing things in accordance with city guidelines and city requirements, more than trying to change the natural channel to convey a certain design storm.
Yeah, this is Mark. I'm just kind of in the chat box. I'm just putting down thoughts that are popping in my head. I don't want to slow down the process of the, because these are just things that we can investigate as we move this forward. I'm just kind of making notes that we can reference later on.
Thank you. Section 5 talks about the easements. They must be donated by the property owner or owners. They're placed on hold if they do not donate the easements. Those easements would allow certain encroachments such as fences, trees, shrubs, and flowers. Non-permanent items are generally going to include vertical structures such as building, accessory structures, or walls. And then, so I want to get through some example projects. We have 3 example projects that we're going to look at. These were the top 3 based off the feedback that we've received so far. Before we get to that, just a little refresher as to what BHI is. It's bank slope and bank height, and you can see on the left how the scoring system would work. Low is 2 and medium is 4 and so on. And obviously bank angle is relatively straightforward. So the first one is Dahlgreen. This is the 2400 block. You can see some, some stream erosion here. We've got an accessory structure right here. And based off that, we would have a BHI of 3, pollutant reduction of 6, buffer restoration of 9, impaired stream watershed Perry 10, and a total score of 56.8. Next example that we want to talk about is 2305 Watkins Streets. Again, you can see it's kind of close to a roadway here, and there's a structure over here that is out of view of this picture. But how this would be a BHI of 5, a pollutant reduction of 4, buffer restoration of 4, impaired stream watershed of 10, this pigeon house, and a total score of 49.7. Next is 3430 Ball Street. Again, you can see kind of it's getting fairly close to the house here in the driveway. So how we would score this is a BHI of 4, pollutant reduction of 4, buffer restoration of 9, impaired stream watershed of 5, and a total score of 47.8. So one of the things that has come up in the past SMAC meetings that stormwater staff are working towards is how do we include equity in these models? And you've heard Barbara talk a little bit about the plan for equity, and we're working with the Office of Equity and Inclusion. But I'd like the commission to know, it's not just for drainage assistance. Obviously, it's for other programs such as CIP and watershed studies. But we want to make sure that we look to include underserved communities based on related stormwater projects as well. Because you can recall from the drainage assistance maps that I've shown, that have been shown, that a lot of the projects are between 440 and 540. And we know that there's a lot more to Raleigh than just between those two interstates. So some ideas that we had for equity, we wanted to look at some metrics that we can use. And one of those is the Wake County Community Vulnerability Index that takes into account poverty rate, unemployment rate, age, and education level. And if you're not familiar with that, this is how it looks. The red is a higher score down to the orange, and then the greens are a lower score. And you can click on the map and it'll show you the different values of the index for that. We also looked at the Wake County Social Vulnerability Index that looks at socioeconomic housing and disability, minority status, and language, housing and transportation. And we believe that this is a good start looking at the Wake County social vulnerability and community indices. That gives us data that we can then plug into the stormwater integrated model. And we would like to use this as some sort of starting point. And so again, this is how the map, the dark blue is the higher vulnerability down to the lighter blue, lower, and then the lowest is the, what I would call yellow is the lowest vulnerability. So that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much for your time, and I welcome any comments, questions, or input.
So on the equity issue, in terms of how you incorporate that variable, would that be similar to the way you give priority to a project in a particular watershed? That if it's in a particular census block group with that higher score, it might receive more points?
Yes, it would be higher in the model. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're being fair and equitable. For example, we wouldn't want a project that had, say, go back to the drainage systems model, and you had a project with yard flooding. We wouldn't want that to say jump up on a project that was flooding because of the 5-year storm. It's tricky. We gotta be careful with the approach, but we want to make sure we're being fair and equitable as we apply this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Wayne. If I could weigh in too, and Chad's mentioned this, but this is something that we're looking to adapt not only for the stream stabilization program, but prioritization for all of our capital improvements projects. So this is something we're looking at widespread. We're still in the early development stages of how we would do this, but at this point, we envision the technical scoring would be done the way it is right now. And then this additional factor would be a multiplier that might boost scores depending on how they fall into the social vulnerability index and other potential factors. One I'd like to acknowledge because Reverend Taylor isn't here, he brought it up, and we're also considering underserved communities based on our history of past stormwater projects by census block. We could look at and add a factor for locations that hadn't received stormwater funding in the terms of capital projects in the past, and that could be another factor that we could look at. So this is still a work in progress. No decision needed right now, but any feedback, other ideas, positives on any suggestions we've made would certainly be welcome. And this is something that, as Barbara also said at the beginning of the meeting, is an ongoing effort as part of this overall equity and inclusion framework that we're developing for our programs under our watershed planning as well.
Yeah, I think it's good we're looking at that, and it's a challenging issue to how to get your arms around that equity and apply it to these kinds of projects. And I think, as Chaz noted, and we found out, when I was working on this in the past, took a look at our capital projects, and it was obvious that they were focused, and there was a part of the city of Raleigh that wasn't being well served, and so we had to make some adjustments. But I think we take our best shot at it, coming up what we think will work, then over time see if it does distribute the projects well across the city. If not, we tweak the process a little bit later. I think the whole program, we can tweak it as we move along. We don't have to etch it in stone right now, because we're going to learn as we go along.
I'm pleased to see the inclusion of some, looks like, fairly practical approaches to gauging equity and prioritizing that. I can, only as a layperson seeing neighborhoods in Southeast Raleigh get turned over, and you know, properties changing hands and being improved as investment comes into those neighborhoods. I guess one reservation, well, one thing that maybe someone from the city's equity inclusion office might have expertise in is how do we balance the essentially incentivizing of redevelopment with how do we do that in a way that fosters preservation of community and enhancement of a community versus you know, flipping houses essentially and changing the community and the people that live there. Again, I'm probably not being terribly articulate, but I just as a lay observer, those are some of the hesitations I have in mind and would love to hear from more experts on.
Yeah, excellent point, and certainly something we're engaging our, which is now a department recently changed from the Office of Equity Inclusion to the Department of Equity Inclusion. Okay. We're definitely engaging them in the conversation, and I think that's an excellent point. You know, we don't want to do something that would encourage gentrification and changing the community to a degree it's no longer the community it was. So it is a difficult balancing act. Very, very good point.
Like Mark said, you know, we have to start somewhere. We'll probably never have something perfect, but I think these are good steps in the right direction. Other commission comments, questions? I see in the draft policy here, I'm glad to see this is framed, you know, in the overview as assisting in preserving, restoring, and creating streamside riparian buffers. And you know, one thing I think when somebody says stream bank stabilization, some folks might think, oh, okay, just, you know, channel, line it with concrete, it's stabilized, let's get that water out of there. So I'm glad to see language like that included, and hope we make sure that's a prominent part of the policy.
Yes, absolutely.
Mr. Chair, there are some comments in the chat related to this issue, if I may relay those. There's a representative from the community who is in attendance, Mr. Wells, and he's a representative of the Lake Valley Homeowners Association. We have been in discussion with Mr. Wells about a potential stream stabilization project. And this is an example of a situation where the actual parcel where the stream stabilization project would be located is undeveloped and is an HOA-owned parcel, would not technically qualify under the current policy of the DA program because it's not a ratepayer. So it's a good example of you know, should the commission be okay with this, we may take that criteria out of being a ratepayer. And in this situation, all the homeowners in the neighborhood who are members of the HOA are ratepayers. So I think that's an important point. And then the other point Mr. Wells brings up is they also have a private lake owned by the HOA, which this stream is upstream of, and the erosion of the stream does wash a lot of sediment and silt into the lake. So they're basically providing a benefit by maintaining the lake from a water quality standpoint as well. So just wanted to pass along those 2 points in considerations Mr. Wells has brought up in consideration of how this policy may be developed.
Thank you. Glad to hear that input.
Yeah, and we'll take that into consideration. Any other input on anything in the written policy? One thought we also had is that because there are a number of very close parallels to this policy and the drainage assistance policy, one idea we had was let's combine these into one policy, make some distinctions where needed between the DA policy and the stream stabilization. But I think some of these changes that we're suggesting may also apply to the drainage assistance policy. So that's something we're looking at a staff level, as well as do we go ahead and modify both of these policies together, combine them, but make some of the distinctions where the stream stabilization program may have some unique situations, for example. So if the commission has any feedback on that, we'd welcome it. But this is still a work in progress, and we'll continue to bring back ideas.
Thanks. Anybody else? Comments on that, linkage to drainage assistance, or any other topics we've covered? Okay. Not hearing much more. So what's next here? You'll take the input from today and come back to us at a future meeting with refinements, or?
We will. We'll come back with some refinements. I think we've got enough feedback now that we're ready to bring back a final proposal on what this program and the policy would look like. And so I think at the next meeting, we may be prepared to ask for your input and endorsement on what this is going to look like moving forward. So if there are any other questions, if you think of anything else, please shoot them our way. We'll incorporate that. Otherwise, we'll look at the agenda, whether we can do it next month or the following month. But I would, by the end of this year, certainly be ready to bring back a final proposal.
Okay. So now's our chance.
City Council. Yeah. So this is, and ultimately, because this was the drainage assistance policy was a council adopted policy. In order to change it, and we would anticipate this having to go back to the City Council after the Commission's endorsement.
Okay, and would this, so stream bank stabilization on its own would be a City Council adopted policy, right? Would that constitute a modification?
That. Yes, sir, because this stream bank stabilization really is evolving from the drainage assistance program and policy. We would see those again being, if not the same policy together, at least sister policies, if you will, having a lot of similarities in terms of how they are implemented. And I think the suggestion was made. There may be projects that we end up scoring in each of the programs and seeing how they rank and where they would come up and score best to be implemented. So there are projects that could go one way or the other possibly.
Okay. And regardless
so that's another advantage of them being very similar to each other. I'm sorry, sir.
And that's okay. Regardless of which path it takes, these essentially all begin with a call to the city stormwater program, right? So resident complaint.
Correct. That's correct. Now, well, let me clarify that too, Mr. Chair, as well. One of the items that we've said is that complaints, we are taking the complaints or looking at taking complaints out of the prioritization scoring. And so as part of our watershed planning, other investigations, we're going to be stepping up our stream and riparian buffer investigations. And that's more work that is coming. We're doing a project with USGS and NC State looking at using LIDAR to identify potential high street bank erosion areas. And so we are looking at using other avenues in addition to complaints, but other avenues as well to identify projects that may be brought into this program. So the stream bank stabilization in particular does not necessarily need to originate with a complaint by a private property owner. And again, we see that as an equity issue too.
Absolutely. I'm encouraged by that. Proactively finding these issues helps equalize the playing field for people that haven't felt supported before.
Yeah, that's good information.
Exactly.
And one of the things I'm struggling with a little bit is trying to identify the purpose of this program in comparison to the drainage assistance program. You know, where do the goals and the purposes differ? You know, and that'll help us guide what, you know, our thoughts are on what should qualify, what should be prioritized, and those kinds of things. Like I said, they're kind of overlapping. Any project where you've got severe bank erosion may be eligible for both programs, but you know, which is the focus of which program and how would we split those up? You know, which project goes into which pot and why, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's a very good question. This goes back to the scoring, and Chaz did present some of this information, but you know, in short, and I'll let Chaz jump in too as needed. In short, the drainage assistance program is really focused on public safety and property protection. So if there's a home subject to flooding or a driveway that may be eroded that would hinder access to a house during an event, or you know, a house foundation being infringed upon by a creek bed, and it's really a public safety related issue. Whereas the stream bank stabilization program really is more focused on water quality and reducing sediment loading into the creeks and streams, and trying to stabilize and improve habitat and water quality issues. So they are closely related in terms of, you know, how we'd identify those projects. But the idea of the stream stabilization program is to provide a higher priority for those water quality projects that may score highly in terms of water quality benefits, but may not necessarily have a direct public safety focus, and still give those another avenue to be done.
Thanks, Wayne. And that's kind of what I was thinking. And, you know, when we take it from that perspective, you know, we're talking about whether a project on homeowners association common property that's not a ratepayer, and if it's beneficial to stabilize that stream segment for water quality purposes, then to me, you know, whether they're a ratepayer becomes irrelevant. It's to me a lower deciding factor. Whether or not it's a ratepayer, you're improving water quality in Raleigh as a whole, and it's eroding because of upstream development, most likely that, you know, the city is allowed to happen. I shouldn't say allowed. It was going to happen, but it wasn't regulated by the city at the time. So
right.
I don't think we should penalize those people and not do a project on a particular property, because it will achieve the goals of that stream stabilization project, regardless of ownership or rate paying status.
But Wayne, back to your point, this is Ken. There is a point with the stream stabilization, though. Is there not a point where public safety can become imminent if a habitable structure is in jeopardy, identified as such because of severe stream bank erosion? So that would be a public safety issue as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And those projects already do score well under the drainage assistance program. So, you know, you may recall we do bring projects with that situation on a fairly regular basis, and those score well. I think the difference of the stream stabilization program is there are projects that have significant erosion and stream bank issues that aren't close to a structure that just haven't scored well under the old DA program, but under this new program, they will score higher and we'll be able to do more of those types of projects. While still in this program, as you recall, has a separate funding. So we have, we've not decreased the drainage assistance program. That funding has stayed the same and actually increased a little bit. And this is an additional funding on top of that focused on the stream bank stabilization.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right, any more discussion? Well, Chas, this is clearly an interesting assignment. We started off ahead of schedule on the agenda and we are almost right on time. So thanks for engaging with us and look forward to the next update.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Next up on the agenda is the Stormwater Management Commission's annual report and work plan. So this is the point where we get to, the staff puts together a report to say all the great things that we as a commission have accomplished and supported and look ahead to what we hope to accomplish over the next several months.
Exactly, and I'll take it from there, Mr. Chair. Are you all able to see my screen being shared?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we have assembled a draft of the annual report, and you are correct, Mr. Chair. We all have done a lot in the last year. A lot of work to be proud of. So we've put together a draft. Welcome your input. I will be glad to lead you through it briefly in terms of the major sections of the annual report as proposed. And this is structured very similarly to past years for those of you who have been on the commission. It'll be new to a couple of you, I know. So I'll be glad to take you through this report. One significant change you'll notice is we've used the virtual pictures, the virtual screen pictures today in this annual report version. In the past, we've had pictures of you all standing in a park or on the stairs, but I think that's very reflective of where we are in the world today. So this is really your opportunity to highlight projects, policy changes, and initiatives that the Commission has assisted the stormwater program in implementing. So we have the mission statement, which I think you all are familiar with. We have, this was a suggestion after this first draft with, I think is a good one. We've also developed a vision statement, be stormwater smart. So we're suggesting that we would add that after the mission statement, if you all think that is appropriate. The next section highlights a number of our key stormwater infrastructure projects. There's a picture on the right here of Watkins Drive Lake and the dam overtopping reinforcement and new structure. It was constructed, got an early test after its completion during Tropical Storm Elsa this past July. So we got a good photo of the overtopping protection in action there. And a few of these highlights, Bragg Street Culvert replacement, a project that we've done in cooperation with Raleigh Water and their infrastructure rehabilitation program. A large project in North Ridge, the drainage assistance or drainage improvements project. And that was just finished up in June. And some other smaller projects, Dorothea Drive, a maintenance project, Galahad Drive, you may recall me mentioning that was actually from a failure out by Wake Medical Center that we had to respond to very, very quickly. And please feel free to stop me, cut in if you have any questions or would like to make a comment on any of these. And then we highlight some of the general program areas. The Drainage Assistance Program, you all play a key role in. We talk about a number of the projects, and we've done over $1.25 million worth of projects, and eight construction projects were completed this past year. And here's a list of the highlights: Chapel Hill Road, Overton Court. You'll recall many of these names from past reviews and approvals. The Rainwater Rewards Program, another one that you all play a key role in reviewing and approving projects, and this program continues to go strong. About $230 million worth of projects were completed in fiscal year 2021, and a few notable projects: Rain Garden at Peace University, and a green roof off of Penn Road. And another one in the photo here is the Raleigh Union Station was a past Rainwater Rewards program project. But if you're out there, we've added some more educational signage to show off and help explain some of the features at Raleigh Union Station. So if you're in that area, please stop by and take a look at the new signage that is in place there. The next section highlights a number of our stream restoration and water quality projects. The photo is out at Raleigh Rose Garden. If you've not been out to that facility lately, we have a very nice looking bioretention area, rain garden, associated with that facility, and lots of flowering plants at the appropriate time of year to contribute to the aesthetics of that park as well. And a number of other ongoing water quality related projects that are in various stages. Durant Nature Park, Upper Lake, that was a big first test of our lake management and evaluation program policy changes, and that is moving forward. We'll be giving you an update on the next steps of that in the near future. Millbrook Exchange Park, Wooten Meadows is another project that's under construction right now. Right there, it's actually in the Hare Snipe Creek watershed at the lower end of that by Millbrook Road and Leesville Road. That's one that we expect to finish construction by the end of this year. Some stream daylighting and riparian wetlands construction. So that's an exciting project. A number of the green stormwater infrastructure projects around town that are slated for construction by the end of the year. Those of you who drive on Glenwood Avenue in the vicinity of north of Five Points in the vicinity of St. Mary's may have noticed the bioretention project under construction there. That's one of our 4 GSI bundle projects. We've got another one at Glen Eden Park, a linear bioretention down on Peterson Street, right near the Walnut Creek Wetlands Center, as is another innovative gravel wetland under construction at the Walnut Creek Wetland Park area. So if you're in those areas, stop by and take a look at those construction projects as well. And then, obviously another big highlight of the year was the development of the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan and endorsement of that by City Council. So very proud achievement by the Commission, and staff is excited about implementing this and the 6 action items as well. Some program and policy updates. There was a fee rate change that went into effect July of this year, and appreciate the Commission's support and input in developing the level of service options, and then endorsing the increase of from $5.50 to $7, which was subsequently adopted by City Council. And that has allowed, provided some additional funding for some really key program areas: green stormwater infrastructure, floodplain buyout improvements, ramping up our implementation of a number of our large capital improvements projects, as well as the one we were just talking about. The stream stabilization program was a key addition from that rate increase as well. The stormwater design manual continues to be developed. We're in our second round of stakeholder input now, and we'll be coming back to the commission. Ben Brown, I think, gave you a little bit of an update recently. This we do anticipate that the ultimate goal is to be taking this to council in the spring of next year. This will be, because the design manual is actually interpreted as part of the Unified Development Ordinance, this will be something that goes through a text change process formally in order to adopt it. But there's a number of revisions in here related to how easements are handled, how stormwater permitting is done, additional policies and methods for related to some recent development trends, and so forth. So we'll be bringing back an update on that here by the end of the year as well, to keep you informed on some specifics. The next area is the flood early warning system, another area that we're very proud of. You've heard Kelly Daniel talk about this program. His position is a newly created position this year, focused specifically on implementation of our flood early warning system. And we continue to work with the consultant to implement the next phase of this. This is operational citywide right now. We use it every time there's a storm forecast on the way, and we're getting into the tropical storm. So it's already been very helpful to staff to have this tool in terms of forecasting of rainfall amounts and predictions of flooding. So we'll continue to develop and evolve this program as well. A big milestone from the past year was updating the floodplain regulations to restrict new development in the floodplain. So this will have a big benefit in terms of stopping new development from entering the program and keeping folks safe, especially in residential areas moving forward. And then in partnership with that is the flood hazard mitigation program, which was another area that has increased funding because of the rate increase, where we are looking at voluntary flood buyouts across the city, and we are also in the process of developing the prioritization for that, and that's another one of the programs where the equity related factors that we have been discussing will play a key role in how we move forward with that program. Asset management has been a big focus for us over the last year as well. The Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, MS4 program, you've seen some information about the risk modeling that were developed to help identify assets that are at high risk of failure, so that we can implement rehabilitation before failure occurs and get the aging infrastructure needs addressed before they become critical. That's a program that continues to move forward with excellent progress. And we also are adding the dams and SCMs to that asset management program and implementing very similar risk modeling and prioritization processes for how to do the condition assessment. And we've added, actually, asset management has been a big area. We've added 4 staff members this year. 2 were reclassifications from elsewhere in the program, and 2 were brand new positions from the rate increase. And so we're getting new staff that are focused exclusively on our asset management program. So very, very exciting. The Watershed Planning program, we are implementing the Hairside Creek watershed study. which does include the equity and inclusion framework for community engagement and outreach and prioritization. So that project is moving forward as well, and will be a template for our next generation of watershed studies, as well as give us tools to address equity and inclusion throughout our program areas. Managing lakes, I already mentioned the upper lake at Durant Nature Park as being the pilot, but getting the lake management evaluation program updated and to provide the flexibility to look at options that may not keep a lake as a lake, if that is the best option for the community and for water quality moving forward. So it's nice to have that flexibility available and see that the process worked with our first submittal going through to taking that to City Council, and was unanimously endorsed by City Council to not keep the upper Durant Lake a lake, but move it to a improved water quality feature and a habitat wetland. So that's moving forward as well. We updated our stormwater management plan. This is a requirement under our NPDES MS4 permit, so that's been updated. It's online, and appreciate y'all's review and endorsement of that plan. And then some rain barrel program is an ongoing program and continues to have modest participation, but really a good educational opportunity, along with other education and outreach programs, which have continued. Been a challenge this year because of the pandemic, but still, I think doing some new and innovative things. If you didn't see the story walk around Lake Johnson, this was an approach where all the way to the ocean, a book by Joel Harper. We purchased the rights to that book and had it be a story that families could read as they were walking around Lake Johnson. And we're looking to replicate that same story somewhere else. So if anyone has some suggestions, Shelley Lake is perhaps an option, or Lake Lynn. It seems to work well where there's a loop, a trail going around the lake to implement that kind of a story. You all saw some presentations from our interns. This was, I think, a very successful program that we are looking to continue to have interns. So it's a great way to interact with the community, great way to identify future environmental and water professionals. And so we are budgeting to continue that program. So that's a quick and brief overview of the annual report. I'm glad to take comments now. The commission certainly has the option, if you would like to review it a little bit further, provide input or comments, and we could come back next month for a final vote of endorsement. If you have some minor edits now, we could, caveat the endorsement and add those edits. And so up to the commission on how you would like to proceed. If you think it looks great and we're ready to go, we certainly welcome that as well. And I'll stop there before I go on to the work plan. See if there's any input.
Just jump in there and say, I think it looks great the way it is, and I want to commend you and the staff. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of work you guys have done and a lot of progressive things going on. I'm pretty impressed. I think the council will be impressed.
Yeah, I'll second that. What Mark said, I think it's an excellent plan, and we should consider, I mean, I wouldn't mind approving it today if everybody would think the same way as I do, but I think it's excellent.
Any other commissioners have comments or feedback they want to share on the annual report?
Evan, I think it looks really good. Also, just like to say, we wouldn't be able to function and do what we need to do without the fantastic staff that the city has. I think that's a really unique thing. but I'd be happy to approve today.
Okay. Right. That sounds like pretty glowing endorsements, and I concur. Reading through it, one spelling error stood out to me, and on page 9, the word holistic. That's a pretty minor point, extremely minor point, compared to the impressive amount of work and accomplishments that are laid out here. So
Glad to correct that, sir. Thank you for noting that.
I don't know if you need an official motion from us to endorse this moving forward.
I think that would be helpful. And if, yeah, I think it would be helpful to have an official endorsement of the annual report, because this will go to council as a city council item from the commission, as will the work plan. We typically bring them both at the same time. But I think it would be worth going ahead and endorsing this, and then we can take the work plan separately.
And that, so I would make a motion that we approve the annual report.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Okay, looks unanimous.
Excellent.
Good work,
Thank
Wayne.
you very
Thank you.
much. And yeah, thank you. And I failed to acknowledge Kristen Freeman, who was the primary author and assembler of the report. So kudos to Kristen. As always, she did an excellent job, I think, in putting this report together. Spent a lot of time working with staff to get the content, but also assembled it. So it was a team effort, but Kristen definitely did a nice job leading the effort.
Wayne, out of curiosity, could you remind me how many staff are in the stormwater program?
Yeah, good question. So this fiscal year, we added 5 new positions with the level of service increase. So that brought our total to 71 staff. And then in addition to that, we have 53 staff that are in the stormwater maintenance group of the Transportation Field Services Department that are funded by the Stormwater Utility Program. So they're the ones that do all of the catch basin maintenance, condition assessment work. They have some significant construction capabilities. They've actually delivered a couple of neighborhood improvements projects for us here recently, and are doing more of the drainage assistance projects construction in-house. So and very closely coordinating with them with the asset management program as well. They have closed circuit television, pole camera capabilities. So that's another area I've been meaning to bring more information to you. I think we've touched on that a few places, but yeah, 71 staff in engineering services and 53 staff in transportation total.
I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the efforts of that team. We see a relatively small number of the team members here at the commission meetings. So it's nice to be reminded of, the larger team that's working on these things, and to see the efforts of all those people bearing fruit in these accomplishments. So thanks to the stormwater program staff. Yeah,
thank you. I get to present all of this hard work, but yes, it's a big team effort. I'd like to acknowledge the whole staff. I am having some computer issues here to move on to the work plan. Would Kelly or someone else who has the agenda packet possibly be able to share their screen with the work plan? My computers just went blank. So I don't know if somebody else could share the work plan so that I could talk through that.
I'll try to pull that up.
Thanks very much, Kelly. And my apologies. I'm not sure what happened here, but it looks like it's going to be a reboot effort, which I don't want to do because that'll knock me off of the WebEx call too. Yeah, so I'll give while Kelly's trying to bring that up and share the screen, I'll give a high-level overview of the work plan, which was in your agenda package. There are many similarities to the work plan from this past fiscal year. We have added some areas and elements related to equity. I think you'll see some references to updating our prioritization related to equity factors, as we've already started talking about here. There's increased emphasis on the green stormwater infrastructure plan implementation. I think we talked a lot about the development of the plan in past years, but this year is more focused on implementation of those key elements of the plan. Another area that you'll see, and again, a lot of these will sound familiar, stream stabilization program, focus on developing and implementing that program. You'll see increased discussion of the floodplain voluntary flood hazard mitigation buyout. Oh, great. Thank you very much, Kelly, for bringing that up. And yeah, go ahead and scroll down. So yeah, so there's stream bank stabilization. There's green stormwater infrastructure, incentives for private development, stormwater utility credit and adjustment. That's something that we're continuing to work on. We had been working on along with the design manual. We've decided to carve that out as a separate document, and we'll be also bringing that to the commission. That's something that we brought some preliminary ideas to you last year, got some feedback, and have done some additional work, and we're bringing that back along with the design manual. This is a new one, E, right there. We've mentioned this, but I don't think I've done a lot of discussion with you. We are looking at implementing the city's ability to do stream and wetland and possibly riparian buffer and nutrient banking as a clearinghouse for the city. So that's something, we've got a feasibility study that's underway right now. It's a program that Charlotte has done for stream and wetland mitigation banking. We think it has some good potential to earn mitigation credits for projects, really projects above and beyond regulatory requirements that we're looking to do anyway, and that we can then use those to help offset mitigation needs that other departments may have. So a good opportunity, and I think the issue there is there are other departments that are going to third-party mitigation banks and spending money that then go outside of the city of Raleigh and outside of even Wake County, often down east, to do mitigation down there. And yes, that's beneficial to the Neuse River, but it's not as beneficial to the city of Raleigh. So we'd like to the degree possible, keep that funding to benefit the local community and benefit our urban streams and local streams here in the city of Raleigh. So that's one of the ideas of that program, and we'll be bringing more information on that to you soon. Some of these are very similar to last year, but talking about the policies for prioritizing. This is an area where the risk model is going to be brought forth to you related to asset management, as well as equity and inclusion related issues in how we're doing our priorities. Kelly, go ahead, scroll down, and please, members of the commission, stop me. If you have any questions, input. Here's item E, where the equity consideration specifically is is called out as a key factor that we'll be looking at this year along with the commission to get your input. Yeah, and so here's the floodplain program implementation. Policy issue considerations include equitable treatment of residents involved in the program, including those who may be tenants of rental properties. Something else that's an important equity issue in that buyout program. UDO updates, floodplain ordinance, planning and development ordinances. We've mentioned this as well. The FEMA, it is a goal of ours to become a FEMA cooperating technical partner. That's a designation that we have to apply for and be approved to get, but that would then give the city the ability to update our own floodplain modeling and mapping rather than relying on FEMA to continue to do that. And as you know, our maps haven't been updated since 2006. They're supposed to be updated every 5 years, but it's been over 15 years now. So we'd like to take that over and get it back on schedule again in terms of those updates, as well as being able to expand possibly floodplain designations up inside the 1 mile designation that FEMA has. That's going to help us implement our new floodplain regulations as well. Continued education and outreach programs, involvement programs, something we continue to focus on. The flood early warning system is another important part of these outreach and education programs to help our community be more resilient, be more prepared, and know what to do when we are aware of imminent flooding in dangerous situations. So that's a big part of what we're looking at improving as well. And then overall, some of the more basic functions of the commission in terms of reviewing and improving drainage assistance projects, rainwater rewards projects, requests for variances to stormwater control ordinances. Every once in a while, those will come up that will request your input. And then final, but certainly extremely important, helping us to set priorities and levels of service and budget to be proposed to City Council. So as with the annual report, several options available to the commission. You know, if you would like to take a little bit more time to review this, provide comments now and/or over the next several weeks, and we can reflect any input or comments, bring that back at the next meeting in October for final approval. Or if everyone has reviewed it thoroughly and comfortable with what's in there and ready to move forward now, that would certainly be welcomed as well. And be glad to take any questions, suggestions if there's areas that you would like to add focus that are not reflected adequately or reflected at all in the proposed work plan. We're open to your suggestions as well.
Mission questions?
And thank you, Kelly, for sharing the screen for me.
I mean, my thought is it looks pretty comprehensive and does a great job of capturing the work that we anticipate doing in the coming year. Comfortable with it.
It's certainly ambitious. There's a lot of topics on here. Wondering how we're gonna, well, I guess some of these may come up as the situation warrants, but there's some full agendas in our future.
Correct. There are, but yeah, some of these may or may not come up. It's helpful to have them in the work plan. So as they do come up or want to be addressed, it's something that the commission has the council's authority to do. Really, you know, the intent of this work plan is to let the council review the proposal and basically endorse the types of discussions and policy reviews and issues that the commission would like to address or potentially address. It's not necessarily something you have to check all the boxes, but certainly reflects where you'd most likely be spending your time, especially on some of these newer policy areas.
I'm curious about the ordering of the topics under each heading, how that was determined. The A, B, C, D level.
No intention of specific priorities related to the order. I think, to be honest, it was probably more reflective of some items that had already been on there, and when we added a new one, we put it at the end without necessarily reordering in terms of any priority. But if you'd like to reflect priorities anyway by reordering, we'd be glad to do that. But there was no intent or thought process in terms of the first one's being a higher priority.
Well, I think it'd be a pretty large effort to consistently reorder things in terms of priorities. So I won't recommend that we do that now. I do see on the first page of the memo, it looks like there's a paragraph, a header and a paragraph related to stream bank stabilization that may have been accidentally copied and pasted out of place there. That where it says issue and then stream bank stabilization, the paragraph that follows, that all seems to be repeated under item C under sustainable development and water quality and water quality.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're talking about. It's good point. We'll take a look at that for sure and clean that up.
Well, this certainly gives us a good reference document so that we can be fresh and ready to spring into action when these items come up. I would encourage commissioners to read through this and begin thinking about which of these issues you can see yourself diving into in most detail. Any other commissioners have questions, comments?
And Mr. Chair, as we did with the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan last year, if there's an area of particular interest and desire to focus, it may be possible to create a subcommittee, if you will, to focus on that outside of the commission meetings. The monthly meetings are usually fairly packed and limited in terms of the number of topics we can talk about at one point in time. So staff would welcome the opportunity to support something like that if there's an area that you'd like to spend a little bit more time, or a subgroup of the commission would like to spend more time on.
Okay. Well, I'm not hearing a lot of other chatter. So is this an item again where you would need a resolution or a motion by the commission
please.
to move this forward?
If the commission's ready to endorse it. Yes, sir. If the commission's ready to endorse it, I think a motion and a vote would be in order. we could be prepared to take it to city council at possibly at the next, well, whatever the next meeting that we could get on the agenda then, if the commission was ready to do that.
Given that,
I think it would probably be the first October meeting. The first October meeting for city council would be the next one we could get on.
given that, I would make a motion that we approve or endorse the work plan following whatever Ennis staff feels are appropriate to address Evan's comments. Go to the extraneous paragraph there. And
I'll second that, Mark.
All right. Any discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right.
Excellent. And
Thank you,
I'm sorry,
Wayne.
who was the second?
Jonathan.
Who was the second, sir? Jonathan. Okay,
Jonathan.
great. Thank you. Okay. Excellent. That's all we have. Thank you very much for that feedback. We appreciate it.
Thank you. That is the last item on our agenda. We've got 4 minutes to spare. If anybody has any other business they want to raise, if we've got any public comment that has not been voiced, we can cover that now.
I will mention there's one area in the middle of paragraph A under the green stormwater infrastructure header there. I guess where it's kind of midway down below park improvements. I guess that sentence, and then it ties into additional. You see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it looks great.
Okay.
Thank you guys for all the hard work.
Thanks for
Thank you.
catching that.
Yep, we'll modify that too. Thank you.
Okay. Well, if there's not any other business that any commission members want to bring forward and no other public comments, we can adjourn this meeting.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We'll see you guys in October. Thanks,
Thanks,
Wayne.
everybody.
Thanks all the
Appreciate
stormwater
it.
staff.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.